Town Bank Mortgage, NMLS number 512138, is an equal housing lender. This podcast is for informational purposes only. And now, the man born with a 5 o'clock shadow and with the NMLS number 2028-201. He is a gentleman. He is a scholar. He is
Tyler Cralle.
So I may have disproved my own theory today. Kinda. Because while the weather is awful outside, you can actually maybe hear it's been raining since like 2 o'clock on and off. It's raining again as I'm recording this. But it was actually a good day for the bond market. My theory had been that when it's an awful day weather-wise, then the bond market is also bad. But it wasn't a bad day. For at least the 10-year. We actually saw a little divergence in the 10-year and the 30-year fix. We'll talk about that in a second, but I may have disproved my own theory here. But welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of Wilmington Mortgage. I am the aforementioned host of this podcast, Tyler Cralle, of course, loan officer at Town Bank Mortgage right here, Wilmington, North Carolina, where we break down the top stories impacting mortgage rates every single weekday, unless, of course, I just don't do a show. And I have no reasons anymore. I just sometimes don't do shows. That's the way it works. But it was like Scott Bessent Monday. He was all over the news, morning, afternoon. So Scott Bessent Monday. But then we also have to talk about Trump's new trade war, which I do not think the timing is very good. And I'm not alone on that. But let's start with Scott Bessent, since it was Scott Bessent Monday. So we knew that Bessent was going to be doing a press conference at 1 o'clock on Monday about the economic plan to really put pressure on Iran. We knew that. We knew that was going to be happening. But we got a little surprise Monday morning when a report came out from CNBC. They were the first ones on this. That they're floating an idea at the Treasury that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, could use the general account, the TGA, Treasury General Account, to ramp up bond purchases. Because if you remember last week, it was a big story that Scott Bessent said that they were going to double their current purchase rate of bonds from $2 billion to $4 billion. Now, of course, in the grand scheme of things, we're $40 trillion in debt. I think what is the Fed buying now? Like $40 billion? So 2 to 4, while doubling, was kind of a small number to begin with. And so a lot of people kind of just shrugged. And that's why the reaction from the market was a little drop in rates, and then the markets jumped because they said, oh, well, the Treasury is writing a check that they can't cash because that $2 billion isn't going to do much. So what do they need to do more? They don't have the money for it. And so that's where this idea is now being floated. Steve Leisman from CNBC reported that 2 senior Treasury officials said the department could use the TGA to help finance the purchases. Under Treasury Secretary Bessent, the government's cash balance has grown to roughly $950 billion. And it was kind of funny. I did see someone on Twitter said, wow, this is what they're floating before the press conference. What's he going to say at the press conference? And he didn't really address this at the press conference. He did say, he made some kind of funny remark where he was like, we haven't even bought any bonds yet. Like, it was so crazy that someone would ask him about the bond purchases. He started this conversation by announcing that they were going to be doubling their bond purchases. And now he's like annoyed with the question. Like, why are we talking about this? I don't know, because you started the conversation last week. So, yeah. And now somebody from your office is floating this idea. I have to assume he's involved in that. Or 2 people are about to get fired. So it's like, he's like, we haven't bought any bonds yet. Maybe he wanted to get asked about it so he could make that comment. They haven't actually done anything yet. And that all these moves and conversations and everything is all about these hypothetical scenarios. So maybe. So that's what happened in the morning. Yeah, that moved markets a little bit. I think the 10-year was down maybe 4 basis points at one point, something along those lines. And then came the actual press conference. So Scott Bessent, speaking at the Treasury, announced sweeping new sanctions against Iran, launching what the Trump administration is calling, quote, Operation Economic Outcast, in an effort to further isolate Iran. It's Iran, right? That's how you're supposed to say it. I like to go back and forth just for fun. Rather than targeting Iran alone, the new strategy threatens businesses, financial institutions, and countries that continue doing business with Tehran, should I say Tehran every once in a while, dramatically increasing the potential economic reach of U.S. sanctions. Bessent said during the press conference, quote, let there be no ambiguity as to the position of the United States in economic engagement of any kind with this murderous regime will expose those responsible to the full reach of American power. So not mincing words. Do not do business with Iran. Do not do it. The Treasury is sanctioning more than 60 entities, individuals, and vessels around the world that the U.S. says have helped Iran acquire nuclear and missile technology, generate revenue through oil exports, and conduct cyber operations. And it's not just those dealing directly with the country. The administration is also expanding the categories eligible for secondary sanctions, potentially exposing foreign entities that transact with Tehran to U.S. penalties. The measures extend into several critical sectors, including digital assets, gold, aviation, technology, and shipping. Perhaps the strongest warning was aimed at the global financial system. Bessent said that any entity facilitating money laundering on Iran's behalf will, quote, be removed from the U.S. dollar system. The clock just started ticking. Now, for those who haven't been paying attention, Iran's economy has already been decimated by previous wars. They've had a rough go of it for the last couple of years. So they're already dealing with rampant inflation, slow economic growth. In fact, I think they're projecting for Iran's economy to, I think, fall 5%, which is crazy. Like every other country in the world is at least growing. Europe's stagnant, but they're supposed to fall 5%. I mean, oil exports have collapsed. And so the argument is, and it's not a bad one, is that we're going to put economic pressure on, instead of fighting them with weapons and everything else, we'll use the power of markets. And then hope that the economy gets so bad in Iran that the people rise up and kind of overthrow the regime. I mean, assuming that's what they're hoping for. And how long will that take? We have no idea. Some say they're on the verge. Some say they're going to outlast anything. We don't know. But the economy's already in shambles. This is just going to make it even worse. And it's unfortunate because it is going to hurt, the average person in Iran, not the regime, not the people at the top, because they're still going to be living their lifestyle that they become accustomed to. But at some point, the people are going to get so fed up that they're going to rise up. I mean, that's the thinking behind what they're doing. But it's going to cause some problems. I mean, there's no doubt. And so it's going to put some more pressure on the global system. And this kind of brings us to the next big topic of the day, which was Trump's tariffs. They are back in full effect, baby. They are back. And I could not think of a worse time, in all honesty. So it starts with Canada, which is crazy, right? On Monday, so we know that over the weekend, going into the weekend, talks between Canada and the United States fell apart. So last week, Trump made some threats about tariffs against Canada, brought Canada back to the negotiating table. Both sides are arguing that the other side made outrageous demands. Both sides have now, I guess, walked away. And so we saw tariffs on, I think it was like hockey sticks and Crown Royal whiskey were some of the items that were immediately going to get tariffed. And then on Monday, Trump tweeted on Truth Social that Canadian-made cars, trucks, and automotive parts and steel would see their tariffs increase to 50% at the start of 2027, which is crazy that 2027 is next year. It sounds so futuristic, but here we are. Trump said on Truth Social, quote, Canada has been ripping off the United States of America for years, noting that we run a $60 billion trade deficit with our neighbor to the north. Now, I should note, Canada is our our second largest trading partner. Mexico's number one. Canada's number two. China's number three. So Canada's number two. So there's no doubt that it's going to hit Canada, but it's going to hit us too. Worse, Canada, because we're a much bigger country. Imports from all over the place. Canada, not so much. But it's going to hit us too, no doubt. Now, it wasn't just Canada. It was also reported on Monday. Bloomberg reported on this, that the U.S. is preparing to impose a 7.5% tariff on Chinese goods over allegations of excess manufacturing capacity ahead of a planned meeting between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Reporters Lucille Liu and Jenny Leonard wrote that the move would bring Trump's second-term tariffs on China back to roughly 20%, a level Beijing has said in the past is consistent with its trade, or is not consistent with its trade truce with Washington. The administration is also laying the legal groundwork for a broader tariff regime. This, of course, is after the Supreme Court earlier this year in February struck down the previous tariffs that Trump had imposed on many countries around the globe. After that, in March, the administration opened an investigation into more than a dozen major trading partners under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 over concerns about excess industrial capacity. And so it looks like, and here's the one thing. There was a great piece in the Wall Street Journal. I had to go back and find it it was 8 years ago, about how the one thing that Trump has been consistent about. This isn't like a knock on Trump, because most politicians, there's very few things that they're consistent on. The one thing he has been consistent on is trade. He thinks that a negative trade balance is a bad thing for the country. And I've read this before, but I believe it was Lee Iacocca, 80s business icon, automotive world. He was the one who really led Trump to believe this, which makes sense because the guy's in manufacturing. And there is this sort of soft spot by a lot of people about the benefits of having a industrial sector in manufacturing. And that's not to say that there is not a benefit of that. Of course there is. But sometimes it gets romanticized a little more than it probably should. And it's funny because if you really go back, a lot of the people, when the Industrial Revolution happened, were making very similar arguments about the agrarian society and how that was the foundation of the American economy and the working man and everything else. And then, of course, it became industry. And as the economy shifted, the sort of reminiscing nostalgia has also changed. But the one thing that drives me crazy about the arguments, because it's fine. If you want to be a mercantilist system, China does this. They think, having a positive trade balance is the end all be all. It's why they run, it's why they subsidize much of their manufacturing in order to run that positive trade balance. I mean, this is a very, 17th century. I mean, this was the idea, right? Mercantilism was the economic theory that, having a positive trade balance is where the power of a country came from. I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe that that's the case. But if you do believe that, that's fine. The problem that Trump runs into is that he clearly believes that. He clearly has a very mercantilist economic way of thinking. The problem is that he then also will turn around and tout how all this money coming to the United States is a good thing. And the problem is those two cannot coexist. It's the way trade works, right? I mean, you can go back to what's called Triffin's dilemma, which I've talked about before, which is the idea that when you are the world reserve currency, whatever country that produces the world reserve currency, is always going to have to run a negative trade balance with trading partners and just countries all over because they need the US dollar. Because remember, there's only two ways to get the US dollar. You either sell people who have dollars something and they give you dollars, or you go to an currency exchange and trade your currency for the dollar. Now, if you're trading with the US to get dollars, you're going to run a negative trade balance, right? If you're going to a currency market in order to buy dollars, what does that do? That shrinks the amount of dollars in supply, which does what? Makes the dollar stronger, which makes imports more attractive and exports less attractive. And so those are the only two ways. There's no other way to get dollars. And so all these countries need dollars because that's the currency that the world trades in. So they have to run trade balances, negative trade balances. And then on top of it, you have our other negative number in Washington, which is our budget. Go and look at the 30-year auctions. How much is being purchased by foreign investors? A ton. And how are they able to do that? So what they do is they run a negative trade balance with us. They then take those dollars and reinvest them in U.S. Treasuries. If they weren't doing that, who would have to buy those? We would. And so that means every dollar that's going in to buy a Treasury is not going to the private markets. You get the crowding out effect. And so I have no problem I think you're wrong if you believe in mercantilism, but you then can't want global inflows, capital inflows into a country, or foreigners buying our debt because they can't. Because if you're running a positive trade balance, there's no dollars out there for them to use to buy those things or invest. So it's like a contradiction. It's the problem that Trump has always had. He's like, look at all this money that's flowing into the United States. Well, the bigger our trade deficit gets, the more money. It's called the balance of payments. Whatever the amount of money that you are negative with regards to goods and services will always balance with the amount of capital that's flowing in. They match. The current account and the they're going to balance. Maybe not always every year, but over a long enough time period, they're always going to balance. And so if you want a ton of money flowing into a country, you're going to have to run a negative trade balance with those countries. That's the way it works. The editorial board at the Wall Street Journal, not a fan. Writing, quote, Mr. Trump's latest round of border taxes will hit an array of consumer goods, construction materials, and manufacturing components. Republicans are already getting pounded on the campaign trail over his tariffs and inflation. One reason Mr. Trump's frigid approval rating is that voters believe Mr. Trump is waging blunderbuss wars without a strategy. And on trade, they're right. They say the dumbest trade war revisited. But yeah, I mean, it's also, if you remember the last time Trump started this trade war, Liberation Day, April 4th, 2024, inflation was falling. We were coming off of the 50-year high, the Joe Biden administration, 9% inflation. It was falling. It was continuing to fall. Then we had the Trump tariffs, put a little bit of upward pressure, caused the Fed to kind of pull back on their sort of, long-term looking, the forward guidance that everyone talks about on inflation, worried about some of the temporary one-time impacts of some of these tariffs. And now it's completely different. Now, while we did see a little bit of a drop recently, CPI, PCE will get out later this week. Inflation is not technically falling. It's somewhat stagnant. And now on top of it, we're going to be putting some upward pressure with, and even if it's a one-time thing, it's a one-time upward push. And so I don't think it was a good idea last time, but at least the overall economic environment was a stronger one than the one that we're in right now. So I think that these tariffs could have almost a bigger impact, because last time it was everything was pushing. It was sort of like everything was sort of pushing in one direction, which was to lower costs. And then you had this one thing, which was tariffs, that were pushing in the opposite direction, like a headwind versus a tailwind. And now it seems like everything's actually pushing upward with, the war in Iran. You got oil shocks and the pressure that's putting on things. And so now this is, instead of being the one thing, the one headwind versus the much stronger tailwind, this is now maybe the straw that breaks the camel's back. Where now this is the other thing on top of everything else that's also putting upward pressure on prices. So I'm never a fan of tariffs. I'm even less of a fan when we're already facing some problems with higher prices. But all right, we got to go. I can go a little longer. I didn't do a couple shows last week, so it's okay. All right, you guys, it's a busy week. We got Warsh is going to be speaking on Friday at Jackson Hole. Like I mentioned, we got PCE, we got consumer confidence out later today. We have home price data out today as well. There's something else I'm forgetting. Totally blanking. But we got a lot to get to this week. On top of it, we got tariffs and economic pressure on Iran. So it's going to be a busy week. We're not going to be out of stuff to talk about. But you guys enjoy your Tuesday. We'll be back here Wednesday, hopefully, for another edition of Wilmington Mortgage. And remember, as always, do not wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate. Wait.